Welcome to the Engaging African Realities podcast. Please join us as we engage scholars and practitioners in conversations about their experiences from the field and beyond. We hope to bring more awareness about the cutting-edge work going into bolstering the field of grounded African theology and opening new possibilities and frontiers of knowledge.
Welcoming you to the Engaging African Realities podcast. My first question for you is, please tell us a little bit about your previous work at Nagel. I know that you were the first director of the Nagel Institute, but I also know that you're currently still at the Nagel Institute under a different title. So if you could please talk a little bit about your work as the former director of the Nagel Institute.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you. And I'm so glad to be in touch with friends who are interested in what Nagel Institute does. Yes, I've had a varied career. I started out as a professor teaching American history at Trinity College, now Trinity International University in Deerfield, Illinois, and then went from there to Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois, and taught history and started up an institute there too, for the study of American evangelicals. So I'm an Americanist by background. American history is my field, American cultural and religious and political history. And but over the years, the more I studied American religion, the more interested I got in Americans who felt the summons to go serve God elsewhere in the world. And so I got interested in missionaries. And then just about the time I was doing that back in the 80s, this whole field of the history of missions was going through a major conceptual turn to say, well, the real story here is the rise of Christian movements elsewhere in the world. Missionaries were kind of initial catalysts of those things, but the more we find out about world Christianity, the more we understand that it's local agency, it's local initiative that grows the faith and puts down roots in other countries. So I got intrigued by that and just followed that field a bit. I sponsored a conference at Wheaton on it and edited a book. But then I went to be a grant maker, and I worked for the Pew Charitable Trust. I directed their religion program back in the 90s. Wow. And had an opportunity then to see this field of the study of world Christianity really grow and flourish. We made major grants to the University of Edinburgh and Andrew Walls' Center for the Study of Christianity in the Non-Western World. A major project run out of Cambridge University with Brian Stanley, the historian of missions from the United Kingdom, contours of world Christianity, just made dozens of research grants, and same with the Overseas Ministry Study Center. So after about 7 years of that work, I landed at Calvin as the provost in 1996 and was provost at Calvin for 10 years. And, this background in study of world Christianity says North American Christian institutions like Calvin University need to be world Christian in their orientation. So I worked on that as provost, but, after about 8-9 years of that, I said, I think I'm really being called to get closer to the action here. And so I went in and told the president, this will be the end of my second 5-year term. I think that's about enough for me as provost. And he was upset. He says, well, I thought we were working well together. I said, yeah, but there's this other thing I need to do. And long story short, that was the Nagel Institute for the Study of World Christianity. Started in 2006. And so over 15 years now of development. The first 6 years at Nagel, we were working with philosophers. The Nagel Institute is very interdisciplinary. It's not just theology or just history, but it works across the disciplines. So 6 years working with philosophers and North American Christian philosophers, working with their Chinese counterparts in Chinese university philosophy departments. So major work there. In some respects, it kind of resembles the current projects in Africa. It was faculty development, intellectual development, funded research and publication. That is, I guess, if you call the kinds of reflection and analysis, philosophers do research, but, intellectual work and publication. And 6 years, and by the time we were done, there were already 75 books and articles produced out of that. So wow. The folks at Templeton who were funding this, they said, this is lovely, but we're not doing hardly anything in Africa. Can you help us there? And so, really for the last 8 years or so, it's been projects with Templeton funding to strengthen African Christian scholarship, specifically at the intersection of theology and the social sciences. Sorry, that was long-winded.
So what was that transition like, going from not focused on African theology? What was that transition like, going from studying, I believe you said Chinese philosophy, to African theology? What was that transition like?
Well, I don't know about for the others, but for me, it was easy and fun because China was a great stretch. And, I'll never finish learning about Africa, but I'd been at it for some time. All these years, the 80s and 90s, when I was finding ways to help the study of world Christianity, Africa was front and center for me. And one of the chief advisors when we were developing the ideas, the plans for the Nagel Institute, was the Ghanaian theologian Kwame Bediako. He was a dear friend. He'd been a grantee when I was at Pew, and I'd seen his vision for the development of Christian thought in Africa. And I said, anything this man wants to tell me by way of advice, I'm all ears. And so one of the things he said about the Nagel Institute was, there are so many study centers and institutes in American and British and German universities, and they exist to further knowledge as produced by their people, and to further the principally postgraduate education of their students. And he said, what happens so often, he said, and I've seen this happen in African studies in particular, is that this knowledge, intellectual work on learning more about Africa has become an extractive industry. It's like the mining companies, the petroleum companies who come and take the riches out of the continent.
I see.
And enrich the situation back in their home country, and not so much at the source of the wealth. And he said, don't you ever work that way. He said, if you want to do this right, Joel, and he says, I'm glad you're doing this at Little Calvin University, not at Princeton, not at Yale, where these academic juggernauts so often actually exploit intellectuals on my continent. He said that you do this at Calvin, you should be about the development and growth and empowering of intellectual life on the continent. And we took that to heart. So we don't feed a graduate program. We don't have graduate students to push forward to do this work and to get these grants. It's aimed and targeted directly, specifically at the development of African scholarship.
So in
I'm
essence,
so happy for that. And I love the way that Afe and Retief are just, have that vision too and are going after it.
Yeah. So in essence, what the Nagel Institute has been trying to do from the outset is to reverse the prevalent trend of knowledge extraction, and also the nurturing and cultivation of scholars on the African continent.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
And so the grants that we make, and this third initiative, the Engaging African Realities, and the two before it, the grants must be made to an African institution, so an African university or theological school, and the principal investigator must be situated in Africa. Now, we from the very start, we recognize and really love and encourage the participation of diaspora African scholars. So you notice there's a diaspora African scholar who's the project director here, Afi Adagami.
Yes.
And several on the selection committee too. But once again, we say to them, consult, advise, take a subordinate role in a project, but it's not yours to lead, right? Because we want to see African leadership come to the fore.
Yes.
And what I found is so many distinguished African scholars working out of European or British or American or Australian or even Korean universities fear that they will lose touch with what's happening on the continent. They're grateful for what it's meant to them to be African and to rise as African scholars. They don't want to lose that, and they are eager to reinvest themselves. So these projects, really couldn't be all that they've become without the investment of these diaspora scholars too.
So to follow up, my next question is, what was the moment or the defining moments that really solidified the initial idea for the African focused project?
Yeah. Okay. So several things came together. One is for me a lifelong fascination with things African. Even though I started out as an American historian teaching American history, personal contacts with African Christian leaders. Remember my first year out teaching, I was teaching Western Civ in a college in Illinois to a man, a Yoruba man from southern Nigeria, who was older than I was and called me sir, very deferential. But once I got to know him, what he knew and what he had done were just amazing, a saint and a genius. And I said, there's something really dynamic going on in Christian Africa, and I need to find out more about it. So that was part of my spiritual, personal journey, and spiritual and intellectual, was meeting absolutely stellar African Christian leaders while teaching in the U.S. But more specifically, why did Nagel get going in it when it did? Say, why did we conduct the studies that Templeton commissioned in 2013, 2014? I tell you, it was the director of grants at Templeton, Michael Murray. He was an American philosopher. He'd been vitally engaged in getting the Templeton-funded Nagel China projects going. And he had a lifelong dear friend, a fellow American he'd known for 40 years, who had been teaching all that time in Ethiopia. And he caught this man's passion for African Christian intellectual development and said, and his stories, and paid a couple of visits. And he said, there's tremendous potential here, but we really don't know how to enter into it here at Templeton. And so, Joel, could you and the folks at Nagel, could you help us enter in? So it was Templeton initiative. They pushed us to do this. And of course, with my background and my heart for these things, I was good to go. and Nellie, whose principal international experience at that point had been China, and we hired her on that basis to help us with projects in China. She was eager to learn more too. So we made a good team and made recommendations to Templeton, and they said, build projects. Let's see it. What does it look like? How do we get research and analysis in Africa by African teams of scholars? How do we get that to succeed? Because quite frankly, they'd heard a lot of stories about grant-making failures in Africa. And they said, well, what are the dynamics that make for success? And we did our studies, but we had some real experts come along, people like Francis Nyamjo and Mwenden Tangri, who had lots of prior experience working with African research teams in the past. And through this organization called CODESRIA in Dakar, Senegal, the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa. It's an amazing research funding and organizing engine. And it's learned how to succeed in what can often be very difficult contexts for sustaining scholarly work. And we learned from them. We've succeeded. I've got to think we're probably well over 100 books and articles now out of these African projects, and yet more to come. So I'm just it's been the work of many hands and many accomplished scholars, and we're just thrilled with how it's going.
Yes, well, many hands makes the load light. So
that's right.
Yes. So my follow-up question is, what were some challenges that you encountered in this whole transitional process of putting together what is now currently the Engaging African Realities Project?
So I think one of the challenges was understanding what the life of the average African prof is like, and how many cross pressures there are on them for their time and their energies, and so how to design projects so that would be structured in ways to help them to succeed.
I see.
And I think the real key to all this has been the project advisor team we have. So they personally look in on and pay attention to the projects, and they are seasoned field researchers and writers and publishers and teachers. So it's like having just a blue ribbon champion veteran coach in your corner for each of these teams. So I think that's been the big problem to surmount. Of course, at Nagel, we're always wondering, foundations can't stay with things forever. They're project people. They're not sustaining people. Yes. And so we're always wondering, what's the next project going to be? Where's the money going to come from? Because of that, there are certain things that we might like to do at Nagel, but these things cost money, and you have to find investor partners who share your interests.
Yes.
So, here's the case in point. I'm a historian, and that's the kind of thinking and research that I'm passionate about. And Templeton, Sir John Templeton, didn't think much of history.
Really?
He was a forward-looking person.
I see.
He thought, it was he had a hermeneutic of suspicion about history. He says, you have to prove to me its relevance. So, you look at the projects we've done. We've worked with philosophers. We've worked with social scientists. We've worked with theologians. Some of them might have some interest in history of Christianity and in their background, but we can't put that to the fore because of donor interest.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Nagel's done other projects too. One kind of ongoing series was faculty development seminars that we ran, co-sponsored by the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities. in U.S. and Canada. And also there's a kindred group called the Lilly Fellows Network of church-related colleges and universities. And they said, we really need to internationalize our curriculum. We need profs who are engaged in the non-Western world. Our students are increasingly, they're backpackers, they're getting out there, but our profs are lagging behind. Mm-hmm. And so this is faculty development. But we weren't, once again, not just, extracting learning out of the places where we went on seminar. Half of the team would be from that region. So there was benefit on the ground there too. And so we did these seminars, 2 in China, 2 in South Africa, in Indonesia and Brazil and India. And each time we did it, there was a major intellectual product that the profs, the team, produced. So either was a book, and 3 of these times we went out, the people who went on these, the participants were artists. So North American art profs who were, producing artists themselves, artists from the region where we went, professorial and otherwise. So we did these art seminars in China, in South Africa, and in Indonesia. Each of them became, they produced fresh works of art and had a traveling exhibit and exhibit catalogs, just beautiful stuff. I learned so much. But once again, it was donor interest, right? Right. Dear friends, Walter and Darlene Hansen, who have been benefactors for Christian engagement of the arts for many, many years. And when we talked about doing these faculty development seminars, they said, oh, yeah, it'd be fine to do those with theologians and social scientists and philosophers. But how about artists? They're always the last ones to get support and interest. So we put the artists up front, and it's just been delightful.
Do you by any chance know the name of any of the artworks by any chance?
Oh, so the names of the artworks.
Or where I could possibly find them?
Yes. Nellie can send you catalogs. Okay. So the Indonesia catalog, the South Africa catalog, and the China catalog. Okay. Yeah, you both should have those catalogs.
We'll take a look at them.
Just stunning, beautiful, provocative work. Mm-hmm. The courage of the Chinese artists at a time when anybody who's an intellectual in China is just getting hammered down. Mm-hmm. Just very courageous people.
Yeah. If I could just interject, so I'm just curious, and you've woken this curiosity in me as you spoke about your interest in history, and also that the project moves, I guess, with the donors' interest. And you've spoken so much about the expansion of the project and the wonderful work that is done. What do you see as the next for this project?
Well,
what would you hope for?
What would I hope for?
To be the next.
Yeah. Nagel, as I said, we did one of these working seminars in Brazil, and I would love to see Nagel Institute do more work in Latin America. These other parts of the world where English is, so to speak, the lingua franca, right. The common language of intellectual discourse. It's been relatively easy, even in China, for us to relate to scholars from another place. Latin America, no, this is, a different linguistic world, the Spanish and Portuguese.
Right.
And so the work was the group work was tougher. We had to have folks who were bilingual on the team so we could kind of simultaneously translate when we're talking to each other, that sort of thing. But Latin America is such a dynamic place, and after it's, some places the politics and the economy is still quite fragile and fraught, but other places going from strength to strength. the nature of Christianity on the ground really changing. You know, a major growth of Pentecostalism in Latin America, and major winds of renewal and change within the huge Catholic establishment too. So, you know, I just love to see Nagel do more there. You know, you can't engage China without getting under your skin. So I have such a heart for Chinese thought leaders and their love for their nation, for their culture, and to see it flourish and to see it spiritually revived. You know, and it's so hard right now. I mean, there's so many university type exchanges, et cetera, that have just been shut down or extremely limited. What else? Nagel, when it started, said, you know, Europe is kind of out of bounds for us, unless we're talking about diaspora populations. But I think the recent events now just say more and more the great eastern half of Europe. I'd love to see Nagel do more there too. And maybe with Retief moving to the continent now, that might be a little easier. As an American politician famously said, I could see Russia from my kitchen. well, that's Norway, right? So anyway, I'd love to see Nagel do more there too.
Awesome.
The African work. Here's one of the kind of the audacious dreams we put into the book, the report in 2014. We would love to see a Codesria type agency for Christian scholarship in Africa. Mm-hmm. So how could you see this kind of work that Nagel has pioneered with, African initiators really develop momentum and sustainability over time? And to see an agency like that, the need for external funding wouldn't go away. But agencies like this can leverage funding from a lot of sources and kind of diversify the funding to make it more sustainable, and can be kind of programmatic convening centers. I would love to see one of these arise in Africa. So, and it's not for somebody like me to do. It's for one of these Nagel scholars to do. So let's put that challenge out there.
Indeed.
Wow, that's great. That's a great vision for this project.
We'll see. I think my epitaph, I had so many surprising turns in my own life, including like picking up and going to Chicago now. My epitaph needs to be God is full of surprises. So
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Waiting to be surprised by our Nagel scholars. Yeah.
Yes.
What advice do you have for these current grantees beyond, running around in this, running forward and establishing this organization? What would you advise them based on your experience?
I would say, and I just published a piece that talks about my experience in trying to support and encourage Christian scholarship in the U.S. It's just come out in the Christian Scholars Review. I would say, look up to the horizons beyond your own personal projects and say, what is the bigger picture here? What is the Lord doing beyond my project? And assume that God's in it, and say, how do we see where God's in it? Who God's working with? What the mission is? What are our larger aims beyond my particular project? Why should there be a growing and maturing and increasingly powerful Christian intellectual project on the African continent? Why why would such a thing be contemplated or needed, or what its aims be, and to go after it. And what I had to admit in this particular piece, I said, when we started the Institute for the Study of American Evangelicals at Wheaton College nearly 40 years ago, we had two aims. One was to develop a deeper understanding of how these evangelical movements and traditions shaped American life, American history. But then secondly, can we get the evangelical movement in the United States to have a more mature self-understanding and continue its pilgrimage away from fundamentalism towards something nobler and more God-honoring? And so we said, we succeeded on the first point, just tremendous flowering, what I said is a renaissance of Christian scholarship over the last 50 years in America. But we failed on the second point, That's what the January 6th really kind of stabbed me in the heart with, is to see all these white evangelical folks who say they love Jesus, but they want to use their guns to bring down our government, And the opinion polls have just shown alarming acceptance of views like that, resistance to science. You just go down the list of social pathologies in America, and the white evangelicals make up a significant sector of people who are with those things. And that just broke my heart. I said, so we've had a renaissance, but not a reformation.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe the African Christian scholars can be asking, what does a Christian intellectual renaissance look like in Africa? And what would a reformation look like in Africa?
Yes.
And how do we do better than the Americans have on this point?
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. That's quite thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm moving to Chicago, the windy city, which is named for windy politicians, not weather conditions.
I see.
And the unofficial motto of the city comes from William Burnham, the great architect, the designer and director of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, who said, make no small plans. They do not stir the hearts of men. So, think big, ask what the bigger picture and God's grace and providence is. And how do we do our part?
Wow. So, Alyssa, do you have any lingering questions? I don't have any questions. You've just put me in thought mode with this idea of reformation and what does a reformation look like in Africa, but not just Africa, here, in the U.S. So,
absolutely. I think it's time for a new confessing movement.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Something that we can truly live out. Yeah. And that would not just be words, but that we can see through the conducts and the actions of scholars, of leaders in our faith institutions and every sector.
Theologians are accused of cheapening the term kairos moment, right? Everything's a kairos moment,
right?
But by golly, this is one. This is one now.
Absolutely.
In so many ways, and so many things. I think, particularly white Christian Americans, need to confess. And point the way forward, and by God's grace. but I belong to a confessional church. I mean,
Right.
so we do confessions.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the
It's
thing
not
with
exactly an evangelical way of doing things. Huh?
right. I guess the thing with the Kairos moments also is to get everyone on board to recognize it, right? Not everyone is able to recognize it and acknowledge this moment.
Yeah, but you have to put the word out anyway.
Yes, absolutely.
You're not going to get everybody on board.
That's where you have to start. That's where we start. Yeah.
I mean, that's why we need to listen as much as we can to folks like Tinico Malaleke, who he's not waiting to get everybody on board.
Right.
He speaks the word of the Lord for the moment as he sees it. Yeah.
And perhaps all that's really needed is a critical mass, more so.
Yes.
To get enough people and individuals to get on board with the ideas.
So speak the truth as God's given it to you, and trust the Spirit to convict people.
So would like to thank you for coming on to our show, Professor Carpenter.
Yeah. Oh, what a pleasure.
Yes.
Yeah, and I hope to stay affiliated with Nagel. So, and find ways to consult and encourage on the projects.
Right.
So,
I sort of wonder if you have a choice in that.
Yeah. So, it's a nice position to be in, to be affiliated but not employed, and not have to worry about the fundraising.
Right. I'm sure you'll stay active and with us.
Yes.
You bet.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I was just floored by what I did here, and I wish that we could continue this conversation, but I know that there will be more in the future as you continue to work with Nagel grantees.
All right. Well, colleagues, great to talk with you, and more power to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.